You're watching Mountain Computers.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Mountain Components, the series where I take a look at computer components and do some explanation as to what they do, how they fit together, and how they work. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the components that you would need to build a basic computer. We'll be using the basic classes of off-the-shelf components that you could purchase at any Micro Center, NCIX, Newegg, or otherwise. And for simplicity's sake, I'll only be covering the bare essentials. So only typical components are going to be included, nothing extra. Alright, so there are 7 basic components that you'll need to buy to build a very basic computer. They are a central processing unit, or CPU, a motherboard, memory, or sometimes called RAM, a storage drive, which is not to be confused with memory. The terms can interchangeably be used for both, but usually a person who knows what they're talking about will refer to memory and RAM interchangeably, not storage space. A computer case, a graphics card, and a power supply, which is sometimes also called a PSU. There are some bare minimum considerations that you'll want to take into account when considering these parts if you're building a new computer. There are several other specific considerations you'll want to take into account when deciding on individual components, but since this video is about a computer from the perspective of a system and not each component, we'll just be covering the interfacing of the parts and not the parts each on their own. So the first thing that you'll want to make sure of is that your CPU socket matches your motherboard. Now this is a consideration for modern systems. Older systems, if you're building on perhaps say the socket LGA775, not every CPU that fits into the socket works correctly, but if you're building a new computer with relatively new components, say within the past 5 years, you should be good by just matching these up. And if the sockets don't match, there's no way that your CPU is going to be able to plug into your motherboard. Some experienced computer builders may be wondering why my components list doesn't include a cooler for the CPU. I purposely omitted this for a very simple reason, and that's that most entry-level CPUs include a cooler right out of the box, as long as you're buying them brand new. Remember, we're going for the bare minimum here. For memory, you'll want to make sure that the generation of memory that you're buying is compatible with the motherboard that you're considering. A new PC will generally use the 4th generation of our current RAM technology, commonly abbreviated as DDR4. You want to make sure that your motherboard has enough slots to support the number of sticks of RAM that you're going to be buying. Some motherboards have 2 slots, some have 4, and some even have up to 8. Just make sure that you don't buy more sticks than your motherboard has slots for. Storage drives come in a variety of technologies, sizes, and communication standards. You'll want to make sure that the case that you're buying has enough mounting positions for the drives that you'll be wanting to use, and that your motherboard has enough receptacles to receive all the drives that you plan to populate it with. When it comes to your case, you want to make sure that your case will support the motherboard size that you plan to use. There are a few standard sizes, and some cases support multiple sizes. You'll also want to make sure that your case supports the size of power supply that you plan to get. This usually only affects systems where you're using very small components, but it's good to check to be sure. When it comes to your graphics card, you have 2 main options. If your CPU comes with on-chip graphics, sometimes called integrated graphics, or sometimes called an iGPU for short, and you won't necessarily be using applications that heavily leverage graphically intensive tasks, then you may not need to explicitly buy a separate graphics card, and you can opt to plug your monitor into your motherboard directly which is bringing out the graphics chip that's on your CPU die. But for those of you who will be playing 3D video games, video editing, or encoding, etc., or those whose CPU does not include onboard graphics, it's nearly a necessity for you to purchase a dedicated GPU. You'll want to make sure that your graphics card isn't so long that it doesn't fit into your case, and you'll want to also make sure that your case has enough available expansion slots to fit your desired graphics card. When it comes to data transmission on these cards, virtually every card is attached over the 16-lane PCIe standard bus now, so that's basically a non-issue for you. Last, when it comes to power supplies, you want to ensure that your power supply will be able to supply enough power at one time, measured in watts, to all of your other components in your system. There are a few helpful tools online that can help you figure out how many watts your system's going to require based on the components that you have by simply telling it which components you plan to get, and then it will spit back out at you a number in watts associated with what it thinks you should buy as a recommended wattage for your power supply. You may also care about the efficiency rating of your power supply. I'll cover this in more detail in a video dedicated to power supplies, but essentially, the better the efficiency rating, the less power your system will draw from the wall, and the lower your electric bill will be. And the last thing to consider is the outlets that your power supply provides you. Make sure that the PSU has the same PCIe power configuration or greater than what your graphics card requires, and make sure that there's enough drive power cables to feed power to all the drives that you plan to use. So if you've made it to this point in the video, congratulations! You now know the basic components that are required to build a PC in general. But wait a minute, if this is your first time learning all of this information, this is your first video on this topic, then I would not recommend going out and buying anything just yet. Wait to watch some other videos first so that you know more about each individual component first. I'll be putting out more videos on this playlist all the time, so check back once in a while to see if there's anything more. Next time I'll be covering the basic purpose that each of these components serves to achieve, but that's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching.